In 2019, Union Pacific spent $5.8 billion buying back its own stock. That same year, upgrading every hazardous materials train in America to a safer braking system would have cost $491 million over 20 years. They chose the buybacks. This is not an accident. It is arithmetic. By the end of this video, you will see exactly how a railroad calculated that crashes were cheaper than brakes, and why the federal government agreed. A train moving at highway speed does not stop like a car. The brakes most freight trains use are based on 19th century air pressure, traveling down the length of the train, car by car, before each set of wheels begins to slow. In a full emergency, the delay from the engineer's hand to the last car's brakes is about 350 milliseconds, roughly the blink of an eye, but enough for a mile-long train to travel dozens of feet further before stopping. Electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, called ECP brakes, change this equation. With ECP, every car receives the command at the same instant. The Federal Railroad Administration measured the difference, 22 milliseconds for ECP versus 350 for standard air brakes. In field tests, that meant a train could stop in 520 feet instead of 1,250 feet, a 58% reduction. On June 28, 2004, near McDonough, Texas, the difference between stopping and not stopping became painfully clear. Before dawn, a Union Pacific freight train missed a signal and entered a siding already occupied by a Burlington Northern Santa Fe train. The collision ruptured a tank car loaded with pressurized chlorine. Within seconds, a toxic plume spread downwind. 2 people in a house just 700 feet from the track died of asphyxiation. The Union Pacific conductor was also killed. 43 more were hospitalized, and authorities evacuated a 2-mile radius around the site. The National Transportation Safety Board reconstructed the minute-by-minute timeline. The engineer passed the warning signal at 5:03 a.m. At 5:03:19 a.m., the trains collided. By 5:03:23 a.m., chlorine was venting from the breached tank car. The first 911 call came at 5:03:32 a.m. Within a minute, local officials ordered the evacuation. The house where the 2 residents died stood well within the danger zone, close enough that even a few seconds difference in stopping distance might have changed the outcome. The technology to slow or stop that train sooner was not theoretical. It had been tested, documented, and presented in federal reports. The latency numbers, 22 milliseconds for ECP and 350 for conventional, were not projections but field measurements. The industry's own technical sheets confirmed the hardware worked as designed. Yet, as the Association of American Railroads stated in a 2005 safety conference slide, if there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of ECP brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis. For the McDonough family, the calculation was not abstract. The cost of inaction was measured in 3 deaths, 43 injuries, and a community forced from their homes. The arithmetic that governed which brakes were installed was not a secret. It was written into regulatory dockets, industry presentations, and the aftermath of a single house at risk. Roughly 25 million Americans live within a mile of rail corridors that regularly carry hazardous materials. This figure comes from the Federal Railroad Administration's population exposure analysis, which overlays census block groups with the mapped routes of Class 1 freight lines. These corridors cut through cities, suburbs, and rural towns, sometimes passing within a few hundred feet of schools, hospitals, or homes. The risk is not theoretical or rare. The Department of Transportation's regulatory filings treat this entire population as the denominator in risk calculations. When federal agencies evaluate whether to require new safety technology, they use a specific formula. The value of a statistical life, called the VSL, is set by regulation. In the 2015 ECP brake rule, the Department of Transportation assigned this figure at $9.5 million. The regulatory impact analysis then multiplies the expected number of fatalities avoided by this value, discounts future benefits at 3% per year, and compares the sum to the projected cost of equipment, installation, and maintenance. This is the official math that decides whether a safety upgrade becomes mandatory, optional, or abandoned. The same approach applied to PTC. The NTSB placed PTC on its most wanted list in 1990. By the time final implementation was achieved in 2020, more than 300 deaths had occurred in accidents identified by the NTSB as PTC preventable. These casualties include the 25 killed at Chatsworth, California in 2008 and the 3 in McDonough, Texas in 2004. Each of these deaths was entered into the cost-benefit ledger multiplied by the VSL, then discounted as a future benefit. The numbers are not hidden. They are listed in the footnotes and tables of every regulatory docket. 25 million people exposed, 300 lives lost while PTC remained delayed. $9.5 million per life, discounted at 3%, weighed against the capital outlay for new brakes or train control systems. The Association of American Railroads made its position explicit in a 2005 presentation. If there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of ECP brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis. The arithmetic converts local tragedy into national policy. The same formula appears in the repeal of the ECP brake rule, in the delayed deployment of PTC, and in the workforce reductions justified by precision-scheduled railroading. Each time, the calculation is performed in the open, with exposure, cost, and loss reduced to cells in a spreadsheet. The outcome is not an accident. It is the result of rules that allow the price of a life, multiplied and discounted, to be balanced against the cost of prevention. The regulatory record on ECP brakes reads less like a debate and more like a chain of receipts. In 2015, the Department of Transportation finalized a rule requiring electronically controlled pneumatic brakes on new tank cars carrying hazardous materials. The regulatory docket included a full cost-benefit analysis, with numbers for avoided accidents, equipment costs, and a value of $9.5 million for each statistical life saved. But the industry response was already written. The Association of American Railroads submitted a comment to the docket, saying that if there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of ECP brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis. This was not a stray remark. The AAR's opposition was formal, detailed, and persistent. Its regulatory filings challenged the projected safety gains, labeled the cost assumptions as unrealistic, and attached a spreadsheet prepared by its own economics team. The AAR's estimate placed the national cost of ECP brakes at $4.2 billion over 10 years, more than double the government's highest projection. That number became the anchor for Congress's mandated review, even as the DOT's own analysis cited a 20-year cost between $375 million and $492 million. The AAR had another advantage: control over the only accredited test facility for ECP brakes. The Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado, operated by Transportation Technology Center Incorporated, was 45% owned by the AAR. Its staff, schedule, and protocols were subject to industry priorities. When Congress ordered the Federal Railroad Administration to conduct an independent study of ECP brakes, the agency had no choice but to contract with the AAR's own test center. The result was a dead end. According to a 2017 Government Accountability Office report, the FRA's reliance on a single industry-owned laboratory created a conflict of interest that made an unbiased study impossible. Internal audits later confirmed that the scheduled tests were never run. The official reason was staffing constraints tied to AAR budget decisions. The regulatory process continued anyway. In December 2017, the Trump administration published a final notice repealing the ECP brake mandate. The repeal cited a revised cost-benefit analysis that now showed negative net benefits. The new analysis was based on updated cost estimates, a lower projected fatality reduction, and an extended 30-year time horizon. But buried in the record was an error. Internal memos from the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, later obtained through FOIA, revealed that $117 million in accident damage costs had been omitted from the benefit calculation due to a spreadsheet coding mistake. The error was acknowledged but not corrected before the repeal went into effect. A 2023 Associated Press investigation confirmed that, had the omitted figure been included, the rule would have shown a net benefit rather than a cost. The outcome was not an accident of bureaucracy. It was the result of a system in which the industry supplied the cost estimates, controlled the test site, and wrote the argument that business value, not safety, should decide which technology is installed. The AAR's statement, entered into the docket and repeated in federal filings, became the logic that dismantled the rule before it could take effect. The regulatory receipts are all public. The comment letters, the GAO report, the internal memos, the Associated Press fact-check, and the final repeal notice. Together, they document a process in which the cost of prevention was always someone else's expense, while the cost of a crash could be discounted, omitted, or written off. At 4:22 p.m. on September 12, 2008, Metrolink commuter train 111 collided head-on with a Union Pacific freight train on a single track in Chatsworth, California. The Metrolink engineer Robert Sanchez failed to stop at a red signal. The National Transportation Safety Board investigation later determined that Sanchez had been exchanging text messages in the minutes before the crash. In the 5 seconds before impact, the two trains closed the final distance at a combined speed of nearly 83 miles per hour. The lead passenger car telescoped more than 50 feet into itself. 25 people died. 135 more were injured. The final report by the NTSB listed distraction as the primary cause, but the board also wrote, in plain language, that positive train control would have prevented the crash. The technology to enforce a stop signal existed. The federal mandate requiring it had passed that same year, but the deadline for installation was still 7 years away. The aftermath was recorded in hospital intake logs, emergency dispatch transcripts, and the NTSB docket. Victims included a 19-year-old college student, a grandmother on her way to visit family, and a Metrolink conductor who had just returned from medical leave. The coroner's report listed causes of death as blunt force trauma, crush injuries, and asphyxiation. Survivors described crawling through twisted metal and smoke. Rescue crews worked through the night to extricate bodies from the wreckage. News coverage ran for days, but the policy response unfolded in documents and conference calls. The NTSB renewed its call for nationwide PTC. The Association of American Railroads, in its filings, cited cost and implementation challenges. Congress extended the compliance deadline twice, first to 2018, then to 2020, after every Class I railroad requested more time. The arithmetic appeared in the regulatory impact analyses. The Department of Transportation assigned $9.5 million as the value of a statistical life. Each projected fatality avoided by PTC was multiplied by this figure, then discounted at 3% per year. In the years between the Chatsworth collision and full PTC implementation, more than 300 additional deaths occurred in accidents the NTSB classified as PTC preventable. Each was entered into the cost-benefit ledger. The logic was not hidden. In 2015, the Association of American Railroads wrote that if there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of ECP brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis. The same logic applied to PTC. The cost of prevention was compared to the price of loss, and the deadline moved. The link between policy and outcome was not theoretical. In December 2017, BNSF. Railway Chief Executive Officer Carl Ice placed a phone call to Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao. A transcript released under the Freedom of Information Act records Ice thanking the Secretary for repealing the ECP brake rule and saying it was a win for the industry and for the nation's freight system. The repeal had been justified by a revised cost-benefit analysis, one that omitted $117 million in accident damage costs because of a spreadsheet error. The omission was acknowledged in internal memos but left uncorrected before the rule was rescinded. The evidence is not speculative. It is documented in NTSB reports, regulatory dockets, Freedom of Information Act, released phone logs, and financial filings. The deaths at Chatsworth were not the result of unforeseeable chance or technical impossibility. They were the known, calculated cost of delay. The same calculation was repeated in the repeal of ECP brakes, in the extensions for PTC, and in the workforce reductions that followed. The receipts are public. The consequences are recorded in names and numbers. Union Pacific's internal records show how the arithmetic of safety was translated into quarterly gains. In sworn testimony, former Union Pacific engineer Michael Paul Lindsay described the shift under precision scheduled railroading. Inspection times for freight cars dropped from 5.5 minutes to less than 1 minute. The reduction was not an accident of efficiency, but a line item in the operating plan. Fewer workers, faster turnarounds, and deferred maintenance all fed the same bottom line. In 2019, Union Pacific spent $5.8 billion on share buybacks, over 10 times the highest projected 20-year cost of the nationwide installation of electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, which the Department of Transportation estimated at $491.7 million. Regulatory filings are explicit. The Association of American Railroads told the federal docket that if business benefits had outweighed the costs of electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, industry would have installed them on a widespread basis. The company's SEC filings list annual payouts to shareholders in the billions, dwarfing the sums that would have equipped every hazardous material train with the fastest brakes available. The same cost-benefit equation surfaced in every decision, delaying positive train control, repealing the electronically controlled pneumatic rule, and cutting inspection staff. Each measure increased returns to investors, while the price of prevention remained a theoretical expense until the day it was not. 3 numbers remain, each one printed in the regulatory record. 58%, the measured reduction in stopping distance when ECP brakes are used instead of standard air brakes. The Federal Railroad Administration's field tests documented the figure: 1,250 feet with conventional brakes, 520 feet with ECP. The difference was not hypothetical. It was confirmed in laboratory data, revenue service trials, and repeated in the National Academy's review. Less than 0.02%, the highest documented failure rate for ECP systems, according to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's supplemental analysis. This number comes from cumulative train hours logged during field demonstrations. In the rare event that a fault occurred, the system defaulted to full pneumatic backup within 120 milliseconds. The risk of total brake loss was not just low, it was functionally negligible, with a proven fallback already in place. $13,000, the quoted price for a complete ECP retrofit kit per car, as submitted by vendors in the regulatory docket. The Department of Transportation's cost model used this figure for its 2015 rulemaking, aligning with industry estimates and bulk purchase discounts. The projected nationwide cost to retrofit every tank car carrying hazardous materials fell between $375 and $492 million over 20 years, a sum that, in a single year, was dwarfed by Union Pacific's share buybacks. The official record contains no denial of these numbers. The only answer, repeated in the Association of American Railroads filings and entered into the federal docket, reads, "If there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of ECP brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis." The numbers are not in dispute. The question left behind is who exactly benefited by leaving the calculation unfinished. Today, the industry's position remains unchanged. Their argument is this: if there were business benefits that outweighed the costs of electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, industry would have installed ECP brakes on a widespread basis. The arithmetic is public, the casualty figures are documented, and the calculation persists. Each train that rolls by carries not just freight, but the ledger of what has been deemed acceptable risk. The numbers speak. The decision stands. What follows is ours to bear.